Welcome to this Force Friday, where we are going to discuss with you line weight and how to use it. So there is actually quite a few uses to line, and between myself, Mritunjay, and Swenley, we're going to share with you a whole bunch of tricks that will help hopefully bring your drawings to a whole new level. So before we do so, let's say hello as always to our other Force instructors. So hey guys, how are you doing? How's it going, Mritunjay?
Going good. Practicing with some line weights.
How are you doing, Swenley?
Good. Excited as always.
Yeah, line weight's an interesting thing, you know. I guess the first thing I want all of you today that are here with us today to recognize is all the way going back to force and what is the foundation of the whole drawing approach is to understand that we are saying that line is thought, right? And I think that there's no instructor out there that really can argue that, any drawing instructor. I think more of the challenge is how much thought are they or you putting into your line, right? Now, the line is always in the service of something bigger, which is, you know, what am I trying to create? What's the context of the thing I'm drawing? So line is a servant in service of, you know, you trying to create an image, right? An idea that you're trying to visualize. But it really matters. I think it really matters to be someone who knows how to speak in the language of line as much as possible, right? So when I'm mentoring, I usually joke around with saying, hey, you know, it's like I'm here to teach you French. I don't know French, by the way, but if I did, I know German. So here, I'm here to teach you how to speak German. You know, the more I can teach you the alphabet of German, it's like going through kindergarten, right? All the way through, let's say, high school or college. You know, we want to learn the alphabet. We want to learn how letters are put together because each one has a different sound attached to it, and how letters come together to mean bigger things called words, how words come together to make something bigger called sentences, how sentences come together to make paragraphs, and how paragraphs make stories and essays and so on, right? And therefore, they finally really start to represent bigger, deeper, richer ideas of yours. So with all of that, be aware that that's underneath what we're going to be sharing with you today. That's the foundation really to all of this, is to understand and buy into the concept that the three of us believe in, which is that line has meaning. And in our world, line is force, right? Well, guess what? It's also more than force, and maybe different kinds of forces, right? So we're going to share with you how it is force and some other things as well, some other tricks to use in your work, again, to bump up your language, your use of line within your own drawings, okay? So let's get to it. As always, an hour, as we know, goes by so fast, so I'm just gonna jump in here. So I'm gonna go first today. I'll get back to, I think, this drawing at the very end after the other guys have spoken, because some of the stuff they're talking about will be in here. This is an exercise, by the way, that I call skating the page, and it deals with line weight, right? So here, what you're actually trying to convey is pressure in the curves of the line and lightening up on that pressure in the streets, because this is supposed to evoke the physical activity of skating, and that line has speed, right? It's another idea within the line itself, that it actually has different speeds and therefore different forces and physics, right? And we're trying to get this physics in the line, okay? So let's do that, right? So here's how I want to begin. It's kind of what I just talked about. Line is language. We got to buy into the fact that line is language and it has meaning. And your brain, right, you're having to come up with what you're trying to say with that line. So the first thing to believe is you're trying to say something specific with the line itself. What is it you're trying to say? Versus just roughly like sketching and doodling and doodling and doodling and hoping that something's going to show up, right? So what is that, right? What we want to learn is line, and with line weight is, what does it mean? So really what we're doing today is we're going to give you different definitions, right? Talking about words and kind of staying in the metaphor of language today. We're trying to give you different meanings to a line, and how the weight of it, what does weight mean? Typically weight means how light or dark a line is, right? And in the world of art, if somebody had a conversation about line weight, it's typically about how thick or thin the line is, or how light or dark that line is. And like I said, we're going to talk to you about how to do that. How do you use it? So I'm going to start here with the force approach, right, with force theory, and cover that first, right? So let's see here. So we have directional and applied forces when it comes to drawing with force, right? We have this is a directional force, right? And every directional force, let me give you, like I said, just a quick recap here. Every directional force also has applied force. So there's kind of two forces always going on in the line. This is the direction, right? Directional, it tells you where it's going, right? Where did it come from? What's happening? Where's it going, right? But there's this other more, I guess, somewhat invisible one, which is inside, because it's not a line, it's affecting this line, right? And that's the thing to be aware of. So, and I would say equally important. I've kind of, this sounds crazy, but this is kind of stuff I think about. It's like, oh, which one of these is more important? Is it the applied force or directional force? For a while, I was thinking, you know, at the beginning, I would have said directional, because it's really the line that appears to draw the contours of the body, and it's what you're actually drawing, right? But the curvature of that line is really affected by applied force, and how I affect this line is going to bring forth more clarity in my language of what I'm trying to say, right? So I would say they're equally important, is really what I'm trying to get at here, that you should be aware of both of them and how to use them. So what does this mean? Well, to be really simple, to be as simple as possible, if I have directional force that's like this, what's going to happen is the more curved I get, the darker that line is going to become. So I'm going to do the extreme. We're going to do like two keys, almost like animation here, and go, you know, if I were to do that, it would be like this on the other extreme. Why is that? Well, if we were to equate the length of the applied force to how powerful its vector is, then I would say this looks like this, and this looks like this, right? So somewhere in between here, I might be something like that, you see? So, and this one would be a little longer than that, shorter than that, but you can see I'm going from light, sort of medium, to really pushing, right? And the more pointed it gets, that directional force line, the more pointed it gets, the stronger its apex or curve is, the more applied force is pushing into it, right? So this is huge, okay? This is a big deal, because when you're drawing, you know, something very common that I see, of course, with beginners that they don't have in their work when they come to me at first, right? Let's say they just started like a premium membership. All the drawings, you know, all the lines will look like this, right? So I could see right away, okay, they don't understand the language of applied force and power, and how more power, more force, especially applied force, equals darker line, right? That's a big deal. That gives your drawing or your story more variety and more information, right? More exciting information too. Because even just from a visual standpoint, you have a higher contrast, right? The fact that you've got higher contrast in your drawing says, wow, there's a lot of stuff to look at here. And as an audience looking in on a drawing, drawings that typically have more contrast in some way or another are more interesting to look at. Why? Because there's just more stuff going on. The artists themselves had more things to say. You know, it's like saying, it's like saying, I want you to eat sugar every day. Yeah, I love sugar, but sugar every day is not so great, right? You get bored of it. But if you have a wide variety of meals within a day or within a week, that's more exciting, right? What is that line? It's like variety is the spice of life or something like that, right? So same idea, right? The variety is there. Now, I'm not saying variety for the heck of variety. I'm saying variety with intention, right? So we want to have variety in the pressure of our line based on how much applied force is pushing out against the edges of the body, typically the contours of the body, right? And I want to be aware of that. Now, this is also affects speed, right? We were talking about speed. So 2 exercises to help you with this. One, again, is skating. So this is to help with line variety to physics, right? Line variety, let's write up here, line variety from physics, right? So skating is one. Skating is basically you're staying on one line and you're trying to bring in speed, and like I'm almost throwing the line into curves. You see, and I get thin and then thick because I push the power out into it. You see, so that's skating. The second one is the roller coaster, which is almost like skating. The massive difference, roller coaster. The massive difference here is really you're not doing it in one long shot. You build up that power, which is typically what I do when I'm figure drawing, by the way. So I might say, wow, there's a directional curve. Let me shut off this smoothing here. It's driving me nuts. I might push into this curve here, like so, right? But maybe my first pass, I'm all only directional force. I haven't thought about applied force yet. You see how the line is the same throughout. But then immediately I'm like, okay, I've got the trajectory correct. I know where I'm coming from. I know what I have to do, where the apex is, right? This is where the most force will occur. And then I'm leaving. So now I build up, and that allows me to keep feeling all of this stuff, right? Everything that's going on inside. I get to really express and understand the concept of pushing out against that line, right? Like I want to push out and bend it with purpose. I always think of like a metal ruler. I have to keep one by my desk just for the sake of presenting, but I always think of like a metal bar, you know, and if I had this metal bar and I were bending it, you know, and I was holding it over here and over here, you would feel that tension in the curve. Or imagine if something hit it, or I tried to catch a ball with a metal ruler, right? I would catch that ball, and the force of the ball would dictate really how much that metal bar would bend, you see? So that's what's happening here. Line variety from physics, right? So skating the page is a great way of using that. And then there's a roller coaster. Now, just to share with you, the common mistake I see with skating is that the line is all the same. You see what I'm saying? So nothing's changed. Typically, that means you're going too fast, right? You want to slow down. Your hand can draw faster than your head can keep up. You kind of just move your hand around. Your head's not really there with it. So you want to slow down enough to where you're pushing in. You know, you feel yourself push into the curves. You want that physics happening. And the same with the roller coaster, you know, don't just do things in one shot, build up until you really feel like you understand that a curve means something and there's power inside that curve trying to push its way through and push out of it, okay? So those are the exercises at drawingforce.com that we have all students go through, because we believe that line means something, right? And we want this variety, we want that physics in there. So I grabbed two drawings. These are from the first Force book. So those of you who have the books probably would recognize these. You know, you can see I'm pushing up into the shoulder. Here's a diagram of what's happening, right? So you'll notice I'm doing this, right? If I were to soft touch my way into this, I would say I want the upward push of the shoulder. Then I'm going to push up there. And you can see I got a little more anatomy in there. I got the deltoid in there. You know, I got the muscles here, the scapula, and then the back. You can see a lot of the other lines are nowhere near as dark, right? Here, there's a little bit going on as I'm trying to push my way down through the body. And the knuckle, right? And then here, I got pretty dark again, right? It's like I'm really thinking in here about the tightness of the hand. There's a lot of force in a very small space squeezing there. So do I get it all the time in every moment? No, probably not. It's a lot to think about, okay, to have the ability to do that, right? So, sorry, closing the window. There's a lot to think about, right? And then I would say that's probably one of the biggest, I don't know if complaint is maybe too strong of a word, but it's one of the biggest issues I think that comes in with drawing and all the stuff that we try to teach you is there's a lot of stuff to manage while you're drawing. And I don't want it to get to a place where you're like frozen and every mark is like, I have to think about 15 ideas before I put this line down. So you kind of take one in at a time. First, learn how to draw with force. Try to get stuff moving around. Maybe it doesn't have the line pressure thing yet, right? Maybe applied force is not brought in. And then after that, you know, you go, okay, I feel like I understand how things connect. I understand how they move. Now maybe you start trying to bring in the weight idea of the line, right? You know, you can see here, I did it as well. And that's kind of a good segue to my next topic, which is the other great way, another great way to use line and its thickness is literally weight, right? Because gravity is a force in itself, right? So you can see here, I went heavy on the heel of the foot. to present that, okay? So here, before we go into more on the weight thing, one other drawing really quick, one of my favorites actually in the first force book, you can see how I'm pushing all of the pressure up into the shoulder and in the upper back. Now notice that's not just on a contour, it's on the contour of a muscle, but within the interior of the shape of the body. And what I'm talking about is this line right in here, right? Which is the traps, the trapezius near the spine. So I really pushed in there and I pushed in here, you see? Why? Because I'm saying all of this energy is coming up this way, right? I'm basically sweeping up like this and then saying, man, that back, the trap right there is pushing. And so is the deltoid, right? And then from the deltoid, I'm going to come down the tricep and then sweep through the rest of the arm like so, you see? But that's me driving force, the applied force up this way. It's a directional that applies itself to these other directional because they're edges, right? But the amount of energy in here is the applied force, right? Any questions so far that I can answer before I move on to the next thing? Daniel says, does this mean that in a force shape, the curve would always be darker? Yes, that is true. Yeah. Unless it's what I'm going to show you next, Daniel. But yes, I would say in general, that's true. If you were drawing a force shape, and let's say you did this, and you had a straight and a straight over here, this is where I want to start really putting the black, right? My heavier line is going to be there because that's where I'm pushing out. There's only so much one can do in 30 seconds. There isn't enough time to focus on line quality. You just need to get them in. Yeah, that's right. Swemley is saying that. That's true. So in time, I think you can. Believe it or not, even in a 30-second, it's just practice, right? You need to practice this until it's normal. You know, it's like chewing gum and walking. You could chew gum and walk. Maybe when you were little, you couldn't, but now you could chew gum, walk, and have a conversation with somebody, be on the phone. You could be doing 3, 4, 5, 6 things at one time, but it takes practice, right, of each of the skills to do them all at once. Well, in physics, gravity is not always a force, actually. Okay, now we're going to get into physics debate. Maintaining good line quality and weight while doing 30-second pose. Okay, well, let's see. So my next point is weight, right? Here's one of my favorite models when I lived in New Jersey. And she was a more heavy model, right? So it would allow me to at least like take on the concept and actually really try to bring it into the figure, right? So gravity is pulling down, okay? Gravity is pulling down. And it's always pulling down at the same amount of force, right? I forget what G stands for. I'm sure one of you out there knows. But it's always the same amount of force, right? So I just want to be aware of like, where does that show up on the body? Well, ironically, typically where it's going to show up is anything that's sort of on the bottom, right? So maybe this pose is a C torso, it doesn't have a lot of weight or force on the sides, but really at the bottom of the pelvis, ironically, in the rear end is where all that's happening. It's probably not going to happen in the legs. Where is it going to happen? It's going to happen down the leg and in the foot, right? So the feet are actually going to have a lot of stress on them and over here, right? So those are your two places. So be aware that if you want to show gravity, I get students asking lots of times about gravity and weight, put the heavier lines on the bottom. It's not a light and shadow thing. So, and it can be, by the way. You could sort of imply shadow on bottom edges. We're doing it here for the sake of gravity, right? The force of gravity, right? So ironically, here we are talking about drawing with force, and it's not just applied force we're talking about, but we're also talking about the force of gravity. So this is a thing that you can also go through an experience with, right? Maybe it takes you a week, maybe it takes you a month, whatever, but to try to swallow the idea of, I want to be aware of where things are pushing down, right? Everything, or pulling down, everything's being pulled down, right? So like Daniel was asking before about, you know, is the most force on let's say the curved side of a shape? Sure, but what if I have a straight line that's on a bottom edge, right? So here, maybe we have a model, it's like this, maybe their chest is like this, and they're kind of like leaning back. I might have a straight line over here, not for applied force, but because of gravity, right? So you can have both things going in one drawing, okay? I think a good way to start all this that I just recalled was when you're dealing with applied force and you're doing your figure drawing, try to find one location where you're going to really try to power the line in. So from the standpoint of the meaning of a drawing, it's like saying, this is my topic sentence, this is my main idea. So when we look at your drawing, we could say, well, you know what? This student really went after this one concept. Typically, this is going to be the leading edge, right? And if you don't know what that is, we have talked about that in prior videos, or it's on the website, either one. But the leading edge would be like the place of darkest line because the most force is pushing there, right? And again, that's a common mistake. I see students come in with drawings that are doing all kinds of things, and where they put their darkness does not relate to gravity, and it does not relate to applied force, right? It could relate to some other things that you're going to hear from Rotunje and Swenley, but you really want to make sure if there's any use of this darker line that you're thinking about applied force and, you know, and what's your number one idea for it? Where am I really going to put all that effort? So that's one, applied force. And then second over here is we've got gravity. Those are my two topics for today, right? So I thought I would close up with doing this figure drawing and do it twice. And I'm going to purposely do it without using the line the way I just described. And then when I do it with the line, right? So I'll just do some quick, like 30-second sketches here and see about trying to bring it in and not using it, or not using it the way I think I would. It's going to be really hard. I'm trying to think backwards here. Just doodling this out really fast, 30-second kind of drawing. Yeah, it's hard. What I'm having a hard time with is like, oh, that's where you want to put it. Don't put it there, right? So my head's like trying to stop my own brain from how I work. All right, so here's like a little doodle, right? Okay. So there's one where I'm not doing it the way I would, okay? Now let's do one the way I would normally do it. Let's see. Oops. Okay, that goes like that. Something more like this, right? So what's the difference, right? Hopefully what I've proven to you with these two sketches is the accentuation of the darker lines, right, has given us more information about what's going on, right? In the top one, I like darkened her ponytail, right? It's like, why? Why would it be dark there? There's no reason. It's this light poof of hair, right? So there's nothing going on there. I darkened the top edge. Maybe that could work maybe a little bit because I want like the hardness or the sharpness of it. So possible, but typically that's not where I would put most of my effort, right? And then I darkened like the hand floating out there. Really no reason. Maybe I can argue gravity out in the hand, but there's way more important places to put that gravity aspect than the bottom drawing, okay? In the bottom one is what I normally would have went after. And I have to say, when I was going through it, I was trying to think about what if I didn't know this? Like, how did I get here? What I am going through when I'm drawing this is I'm thinking about all the stuff I'm describing to you guys. So I'm like, man, I want to push force into her shoulder. There's a lot of power going in there and going up because her arm is pushing down right against the ground. So there's something called a normal force, which is pushing up into the shoulder. It's the opposite of gravity pulling down, right? This is pushing up. So that's really important, right? That's my leading edge in this pose. I'm trying to drive into that shoulder. I'm going to go dark. when I fell off of that cliff of the shoulder, I dropped down into the hip. I went dark there because to me, the weight is like sitting in there, right? It's sitting in there. And that's why her body is under this stress from her feet to her hand, right? We've got this like triangle down here that's doing its work to support this, right? So this weight is all pushing down into this dark line. This one's pushing its way up because of how this force is pushing up into the shoulder, right? This is pushing up because this is pulling down. So I'm aware of this fight with gravity of the up and down. You know, it just made me realize, talking about fight with gravity, when I was at Disney, there was this really poetic way that they described the bouncing ball that kind of stuck with me, which was that it's a battle with gravity. You know, so you got a bouncing ball. When the ball bounces up, by the way, to me, when I teach animation, I talk about, you know, there's an edge on the ball. You notice I'm going darker on the front. So here, the ball is fighting gravity and it's winning until it's not, right? When at some point it's going to hit its peak, the line will normal out, by the way, right? Because it's equalized. And now it's getting pulled down, right? So now I'm going to push that darker line at the front end because it's pulling down. And sadly, gravity always wins the battle, right? Because we're going to go up and down and up and down and up and down until the ball literally comes to rest here on the ground. You see, and here even I can push darkness. I almost did that kind of automatically. You can see the darkness on the bottom a little bit to put weight on the bottom of the ball, right? So you're dealing with gravity, you're dealing with force. These are two ways that you can bring more interest into your drawing on how to use line. Keep those things in mind. You know, is it going to happen overnight? No, you just got to practice. You got to get used to using that line to think about gravity, to think about force. Take one on at a time. Don't do all at once. Do something over and over again until you understand that concept and it's been integrated into you, and then you move on to the next thing. Sometimes you're going to do that and you'll feel that other things slip away a little bit. Just go back to it. Go, oh, you know what? Wait a minute. I'm starting to forget about this idea. And what I used to do, honestly, is I used to have a long sheet of paper on the side of my drafting table with all the topics I was trying to tackle. And it was there for me to remember, you know, and I would put a line through it if I felt like, you know what, I get this thing now, but it was still there. Just putting a line through it doesn't mean I don't see it. I was just like, okay, I think I've gotten this. And I can always refer back to it and go, you know what, I'm forgetting about gravity again. I should keep that in mind. Okay. All right, let's see. Any questions that I can answer? How do you manage lines which are used to define a shape, not a force? Well, we're really here to talk about force, Mimos art. It depends on what the shape is, right? Like it all comes down to what does the shape present, right? So the other guys are going to talk a little bit more about that than me, but for my part, shape is still a forceful shape. So within that forceful shape, we're talking about an energy trying to push around. Can you say the arm is pushing down? Yes, I would say the arm is driving down, but at the same time, there's energy in it pushing up, right? Because the directional force of that arm was pointing down towards the ground, but there is internal force in it, which I believe in physics is called normal force, pushing up against the push up into the shoulder. So you got two things going on. You got the downwardness and this upwardness pushing up against the shoulder. Any other questions? Would you darken your lines to show depth also? We're actually going to talk probably a little bit more about that in a little bit. The acceleration of a body in Earth's gravitational field expressed in multiples of the force of gravity on Earth equal to 1g. Thank you. Well, in physics, gravity, there's only so much you can do in 30. Okay, so that's it. I'm going to pass it on, right? So I believe, Swenley, you're next, right?
Yes. Thank you, Mike. That was awesome.
Thank you.
I see I need permission to share the screen.
Oh, Zoom. Making me the master of what I don't want to be a master of at all. Let's see, co-host. There you go. You should be able to do it now.
Yes. All right. So let's see. So Mike talked about different aspects of line weight, and I'm going more into the process part, you know, like how you can use line weight in the process, like what we talked about several times in the past, what we call the soft touch approach. because once you're drawing with like an opaque tool, you know, for example, grab this here. So let's see. Need an opaque brush like this. So once you have an opaque tool like this, you know, like for me, psychologically, automatically, it makes me want to like be more careful with my lines, because the line is so dark, so quick, you know, there isn't like, and psychologically, there isn't enough room for me to like stay loose. You can still do it a little bit, but you know, the line feels so final. And it can be intimidating in a sense, especially if you're dealing with a complex pose or you're just starting out, you know. So what you want to do is start with a brush that, or not necessarily a brush, it could be a brush digitally, but you want to start light, you know. So as you can see, this brush is super light and super soft, you know. And now I have to like the psychologically, again, I have the feeling that I have the liberty to like move around, and I can be fast, I can be loose, I can experiment, I can mess things up. Like it's so light, so I don't feel like a commitment to it. No, so I'm going to use this brush to start a figure drawing. And by the way, just a side tip here for those of you who have Clip Studio Paint, there is a handy tool called the subview. You see the subview window? By default, it's next to the navigator. So you can pull it out, you know, and you can drag and drop your references in there. And it's part of the file that you're working with, you know, so you can put multiple references and you can use the arrows to just switch between them, you know. And again, when you save the file, it just saves the reference. Let me see, it seems to be like a bit of a delay for some reason here. Okay, here it is. Let's see, so let's go with this pose. It's quite interesting, so I'm going to put this here. Okay, so again, using a big light brush, you know, takes a lot of the pressure off. So I can start drawing. Now I like the pool here. And like Mike explained, like there is a lot of applied force right here, you know, so automatically I'll start pushing into that corner. You know, it's not as like the stretch is important, but not as important for me as the applied force on that side. So I darken it a little bit, even at this stage. So I can feel like a lot of pull here in that chest, like going over all the way into that shoulder, you know, arms going down, going up, you know. And someone asked about shape, so actually let me do this with shape. And like Mike explained earlier, like we're dealing with force shape, so the shape is still based on the concept of force, you know, so the same ideas apply to the shape because the shape is created by the force line. I need to resize this just a little bit so it fits on the page. Okay, so this for me was the main idea. You know, again, it's somewhat darker there. It's already putting some emphasis on that idea. I want to refine the torso a little bit. The shorts help me see like the top of the pelvis there at the belt line. Get that V shape. And there's a lot of weight on this leg. And she has a very like long physique. So let's see if I can fit this on the screen. So this is going here. Now I can see how the foot is pointing that way. Okay, that other leg. So I can feel like there's a lot of tension here. Like the arc of the foot is applying a lot of force here on the toe. So again, I automatically start going darker, you know, and by contrast, those darker moments in the drawing start attracting attention, you know, saying like, look here, it's like a focal point in a composition. You know, and the other moment would be here, like the feet, like in general in standing poses, the like darker the line, like at the bottom of the foot, or at least the parts that are touching the ground to show weight, like Mike demonstrated earlier. So there's a lot of stretch, and I keep building into that curve, that corner right there, and you can see like how applied force is coming here from the front and it's going across that chest, you know, applying itself to this corner of the torso and also pushing this shoulder and arm out. Now I'm checking this angle, make sure I'm not watering down the pose but keeping the energy and drama. I'm also checking the angle in between the feet. That's working. Get the center line in here. Now, and you can see again, this also applied force here on this hip, like pushing it out. You know, not as much as here. Like I would maintain this one, keep this one a bit darker. So you start creating like this hierarchy of darker moments in the drawing based on what is most important. Now let me reduce this a little bit more so I can get her head. Let's see, so I want the pit of the neck. Force is coming from the upper back into that neck, like the head and neck are moving this direction. You know, so if the neck is going that way, the head is going to follow. You know, right away I can see that I need a stronger angle here, and it's more leaning back. And this arm, oops, this arm needs to be a little bit higher. And again, since I'm working with very light lines at this stage, you know, I don't feel, again, psychologically, I don't feel super committed to any mark that I throw down. You know, it's easy to change things where necessary.
Hey, Swanley, can I jump in real quick?
Yeah, sure.
So one of the questions was about like force on which hip and so on. You know, if you guys know at this point what like a C torso is, which is basically what Swenley is drawing here, like this, you're going to have always three moments with a lot of force and something like that because you're bending the rib cage and the pelvis. So you're going to have force here, you're going to have force here, you're going to have force here, right? Like two parts are going this way and one part's basically going this way, right? If we had to talk about a leading edge here, it would probably be this guy, right? Because in order for her to bend to the right, she would lean into number one. Number one is what like drives it in that direction, you see? So when Swenley's doing that, but that's also not his main part here. What we're saying here to you is we want you to be aware that line weight also can be used to finalize, right? So you use, as he's been describing here, soft touch to allow you to give yourself room to think and discover and figure things out. And darkness comes with solution, right? So part of that solution can be what I was talking about, which is, talking about gravity or talking about more applied force. Solution could just be purely solution. Maybe you just finally get to a cleaned up drawing and it's all equally dark. So you're not going to have the language stuff I talked about, but you're using darkness to resolve, right? To finalize your drawing, right?
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Mike.
Sure.
So, yeah, now that I come this far, like, of course, you can keep working on the soft touch and even like refine it a bit more, and not in the details, but in a big picture kind of sense, you know, making sure like really nail the action and the overall proportions of the model. And then you can come in with a brush that is a bit more opaque and darker, you know. And now because I have this lighter sketch underneath, it's easy to be a bit more confident in like being a bit more definite with my ideas, you know. And I'm still like, even with this brush, I'm still staying fast and loose. You know, the drawing is still subject to change. So I don't want to commit too fast and feel like, you know, I have to, or I can't change anything. Like if I notice something needs to be changed, I just change it, you know, because I keep the drawing, like I didn't put that much time into it yet. So we have the stretch here of the abdomen. And again, what I really like is how the force is coming across her chest. I'm using a bit of surface line, 4 surface lines here to like build all this applied force, pushing into that shoulder, shooting out that arm. This is going up. So let me use a bit more of force shape here. Now going around into that hand. Now hand can be blocked in with very simple shapes to begin with. Now she's just pushing out into that shoulder. So there's also applied force here, not as much as here. See, this is going up. I'm checking this angle. Okay, so this is working. Like my drawing is starting to feel like what she's doing. I could add a bit of the clavicles in here. And this, of course, one way of doing it, especially when I work digitally. I tend to work in different layers, you know, so then once you're done with the first like pass, then you reduce the opacity of the layer and those become your lighter lines. Then you can do another pass on top. Let's see, so this leg, like she's leaning to this side, so there's a lot of light force and stress on this leg right here. You know, and I can especially feel it here, right in the knee. So you notice that I keep hitting that knee a couple of times to darken it. And same here on the foot, like you can feel the stress is on that foot, all the weight. So the thighs fits into that pelvis structure. Going down. So here again, there's a lot of applied force from the arc of the foot into those toes. So I want to darken that moment to show that, you know, and like someone asked, I'm drawing with 4 shapes, but the ideas are the same, you know, like this portion here is a 4 shape, but there is an applied force from the arc of the foot onto that shape, making this darker, you know, and the top of the toes is a bit lighter, you know, so same ideas, it's a 4 shape, so all the rules of force also apply to it. Okay, you can see the hanging, and talking about gravity, the hanging of the hamstrings here. Okay, so this is pretty much like I have the big ideas of the pose down. So next would be a bit more refined, but you know, I can come in here and add smaller forms. So you can see this biceps is flexed, for example. So I can start using shape to define more of the anatomy. Same here, I can start sculpting in like the subtleties of the forearm. This biceps is also like flexing because your arm is bent. But I want to maintain like the darkness right here at that moment, and also within the shoulder. And of course, to show the weight, to keep that on the feet. And I think it's time. I want to give Mattesi ample of time to draw. So hopefully, yeah, hopefully this helps like give you guys more insight into the process, especially if you feel like maybe intimidated or psychologically you feel like you don't have room to make mistakes. Start light and automatically your brain won't feel like you need to commit to the marks that you're putting down. All right, let me stop the share.
Thanks, Wenley. That was great.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right, screen share. All right, so Mike baked the cake, Swenley put it together. Now my job is to like put icing on top of it. So I have two concepts, okay? Like I'll put icing and then put cherry on top. Okay. So the first concept is, okay, so you may be thinking of what this picture is doing here. What this picture is doing here, like landscape in figure drawing, right? But there's an important concept I want to talk about, which is like coming from this painting background thing, okay? As you can see, like what I'm trying to show through this picture is the atmospheric perspective, okay? An atmospheric perspective is that illusion from the like the space, okay, in the landscape when you see. So you lose contrast as you go through, okay, you go at the back, and you lose the details, right? And as you can see, like the thing in the foreground, the trees in the foreground, like they have like really dark contrast, and the mountains at the back and the sky, like which is the farthest layer, by the way, is the lightest one. Okay, we can take that concept from the painting and apply it to same to the figure drawing. Okay, and well, apply the concepts of line weight to create something very beautiful. Okay, and not talking about beautiful, but you can have your like emphasis and ideas. You can present your ideas more. Okay, here's one more picture, like more natural. Yeah, you can see like that, how that air, that atmospheric depth is like created here. Okay, you lose the contrast, you lose the details. Okay, and as you move farther away, it's gonna become like more bluish, like in the atmosphere. But so here I have a drawing. Okay, here I have a drawing, here's another drawing here. Okay, now I can see like I think one person is asking in the chat like how to create depth with the line weight, and see that's what I'm doing here. Okay, see the hand that's coming out towards the camera like this. Okay, and the body is like going back there. Look at the contrast that I created here. Okay, the contrast here, look at the contrast in here, and look at the body, which is like going back. So I'm applying the same concept of this painting, okay, combined with the line weight to create more depth in it. Okay, so that's one of the concept. Here you can see the elbow is like really coming out towards the camera like that. Okay, so I darkened that up. I put like a little bit more details, like to emphasize that part in there. And as the figures like moving into depth, into space, the details are becoming more and more less. Okay, just like that landscape that I showed you. Okay.
Hey,
Same thing.
Mattesi, before you leave these drawings, I'd love for you to do me a favor.
Yeah.
So
sure.
take a black brush and go around the hand, but only its outside shapes. So nothing on the inside, literally just go around the contour and just like trace the outside edge, right, with black line. What I want to show you guys here is I'm going to just push his idea even further. right? So if you just literally shape out the edge, right, you see this thing starts separating itself out, right? It starts to really move forward. And and Mrityunjay could control that. And if you wanted to get maniacal, let's say if you were more of a mathematical artist, you could say that this brush size I'm using here, let's say you were inking, somebody asked about inking.
Yeah.
You could say this, I'm going to use a micron pen number 8 for things in the foreground. And then you could say, I'm going to use micron pen number 5 for middle and 1 for the back. And you could literally not only do that in a scene of perspective, but you could do that on the figure and say, well, the hand is a 10, the arm is a 5, and the shoulder and head are a 1, for instance, right? And if you really want something to pop, no matter how much information and stuff it has in it, you do what I asked Mrityunjay to do here is you basically outline it. It's like a coloring book almost in a sense, right? It's got this thick outline and it pops even more, right? So, and the way to pop something the most is by having a thick outline with not too much information, believe it or not, inside. So the information inside is pretty clean and clear with a thick, dark outline. You can't get any more graphic than that and make something pop off the page any more than that, right? So that's the key. And hopefully it made sense to all of you what Mrityunjay was saying about atmospheric perspective, right? You go into whatever the background is. So the background's light and, like we're on white paper most of the time, then obviously you're going to work, darkness will come forward. Lightness is making it more white. So it disappears. It's like drawing into fog, right? And the same thing would happen the other way, right? If we had dark, you would go with white to make, with chalk, let's say you would draw with white chalk to make something pop forward, and that chalk would get to a darker and darker, thinner line, which makes it more gray and makes it more black, and then it would disappear, right? So it's just an inversion. It's always an inversion of what the value of the surface is, basically, right? Thank you.
That was pretty good insights. We can try that here, let's say if I want to take this figure here and I want to color this black. Yep, we can try that. And this
Yeah,
figure,
yeah,
I'll pull off, and I'm gonna paint it with white. Yeah, something like this. Right?
yeah, that's right, exactly. Right. So
Sure.
right away you can see the brighter white comes forward, right? And the thinner your line gets, the more so it works either way, right? If you already did it in black, it's going to automatically work in white.
Yep.
Yeah, it's cool. Really cool. Thank you.
Right, no worries. So these are the two drawings. Here's one more. So what I did is just like I take the legs part of the figure and see like that that leg, that knee is like really coming forward to us, and then the leg is going back again. So as it's coming forward, it's becoming more darker and darker, and as it goes back again, it becomes more lighter. See the other leg, right? The other foot, like there's like no, let's say, focus onto that, and all you'll be looking at is this figure. So I'm kind of like trapping your eyes and like creating this composition. This is also what I really like about line weight is like you can create a focal point. Okay, so where you want the viewer to look at. Okay, the first thing you're
Yeah,
gonna look at.
highest contrast, right?
Yep, highest contrast.
I have to tell you, I know you did this just as an example for today. I freaking love this drawing. I think it's amazing. Yeah, it's just like a study of space, but man, what an awesome drawing, right? I wish I'd see the rest of it because it's so dynamic, it's so spectacular, and the crushing of that thigh underneath there and how that leg goes back. This gives all of you guys a chance to remember we're in the world of line and the language of line, but we're bringing in painting tools, right? And they're not even painting tools. What they really are human tools, right? It's just the way our eye perceives space. So we're taking what usually people do in paint to perceive space, and you can bring that over to line, which is what Mrityunjay is showing you.
Yep.
Yeah, beautiful drawing.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes the best drawings comes out of nowhere, like enjoyment, right?
Yeah.
All right, so the second concept is line texture. Okay, what is line texture? I mean, some people ask me is that, oh, is that depends upon the texture of the paper? Because when you draw with, let's say on a rough paper with a charcoal, it creates like this, sort of this like this type of texture. Oh, don't have layer. Sorry. All right. Yeah. So like this type, this sort of texture, right? But that's not what the line texture we are talking about right here. Okay, we are talking about the line which can suggest material. Okay, which can suggest like the sensitivity, or which can suggest like more material the object or the thing is made up of. So I'm gonna jump on the first one, and here's the drawing I did for that. Really, let's like quickly throw it in there, just like no, not a big deal. But you can see like what I'm actually doing is I'm actually doing all the soft touch, like my approach is the same in the beginning, but then I start to emphasis on parts, okay, which is let's say this bald head here, okay, which is really hard, like the scalp. That's really hard. I'm gonna show more drawings by my mic, like the awesome drawings, but just for now. See the jaw here. That's like very hard. The brow ridge, which is like kind of like bone, just some thin muscles on top of that. But look here again. So I'm actually creating the contrast between the bones and more the fleshy parts and the muscles, actually, right? There's certain things that you can do with the nude body, just like the bones, somewhere you see the bony landmarks, somewhere you see like more fleshy parts, right? Somewhere you see like more like like maybe the tendons or the hairs, like those sort of things. See the collarbone, like how hard that looks against this fleshy deltoid, okay, which is again the muscle. Look at what I just did with the thumb here. That are like really bony, okay, like no muscle, just supported with the tendons. And look at what I did with the knee here, right? Uh, Look here, with the soft touch, the thighs feels like very fleshy and kind of like that. But with the knee here, that looks very kind of bony. All right, so
Hey,
let's.
before you leave from there, I want to mention one thing I forgot to talk about. Maybe you could draw this for me because I don't think I could draw when you're in on the iPad. In the books, there is actually, believe it or not, a thing on texture, which is that there's a pattern, right? So the head is generally hard, the neck is soft, the rib cage is hard, the core of the body, the abdomen is soft, the pelvis is hard, the thigh is soft, the knee is hard, the calf is soft, the ankle is hard, the foot is soft, right? So the point here is they're patterned. And why are they patterned? Because you're going from joint to joint and you have muscle moving or stretched from joint to joint. So the muscle is typically softer and the bones are harder. So if you want to try to bring in texture into your drawing, just keep in mind the pattern. Right, just keep in mind, okay, I'm drawing the neck, this is an area of muscle, it's going to be a little softer than when I get to the elbow. Now I'm drawing the forearm, it's a little softer. Now I'm at the wrist, it's going to be harder, you see. So at the core, like I said, just to give yourself somewhere to start, think about that pattern.
All right. Yeah, I almost forget about that concept.
Yeah, me too. I just popped in my head now.
All right. So let's do one with this one here, just for the sake of the depth thing that I talked about. Right? Let's do a quick one. So as you can see, like how beautiful this image is, like creating this depth. Sorry for the crude rendering over this. All right. So keeping it with a very like very soft touch and everything. And look, what I'm actually doing, even within the soft touch, is I'm creating like more contrast, right? More contrast here. But this is gonna be quick one, so don't expect it to be like really perfect. All right. Let's do this. I'm really like pushing onto this hand because that's such an important moment, right? Such an important moment for the function of the body, and that's like the really main idea. So now I can like really push in there, okay? As like, oh, this is like really coming forward, so I can really like push it forwards. Police coming. All right, like that. See. So what I'm actually doing is also as a functional standpoint, this contrast is really like well organized, and as a depth perspective, that like the that depth perception that we talked about, also that is like very important for this. All right, let's do a quick one for another for the line texture now. Okay, this is for the line texture. So now where I can push line texture in here, see like the shoulder. Look at that hardness in the shoulder there. That's super important. Okay, so let's do like really quick block out. This might be. Might be like this. If she's pushing her chest out like that. I'm really like focusing on this part in here, right? The neck and the collarbones. Look at the collarbones there, and look at the shoulder. That's what the thing is. So this is like very very strong. Okay, that's leg coming forward like that. All right, let's try. Let's start to push like line texture in there. Okay, so see this one, the bone, like how it's like really sticking out up there. I really want to like focus on that. So see my line texture being there. Okay. Line texture depends upon the flow of the line. Okay, so you can, you'll see that right now. Okay. So the jaw is again like the bone, which is I want to do that. Right? This is the more the muscle. Now the collarbone, see how hard that is, right? I want to draw some forms out of that. Really like crude lines, right? Or maybe like more angular. You can also like push more angles in there sometimes, right? Now look what hair. Hair is so super important. Okay, so hair is soft and bouncy, and here the hair are curly as well. So I'm gonna use these like really soft lines. Okay, I'm not like going for oh the hair is black, so I'm gonna make it black. No, we are suggesting material here. Okay, like suggesting the hairs. So that would be really soft, while the bone in this would be very hard. Now see here what's happening, the muscle, okay, in the on the arm, which is very fleshy, okay? And look at the tricep that's like pushing out in here. So my lines would be like a little bit darker, but see, like I'm making long ideas, okay? So long ideas are different from these lines because these are short ideas and they're like more crude, and these are more fleshy and the long ideas. So here I'm also creating, well, the contrast within the line. So see how much you have to like control within like those things. Okay? So the collarbones again, look at the shoulder. Yeah, and this is the clothing again. See, there's like one more chance for me to put contrast in here. So I don't know if I just like want to do it like really light and long. That would be great. Yeah, so more like this, you know. So you kind of get the idea.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's cool.
now, oh, thanks. So now it's time for my custom drawings. Okay, here's one. All right. So this is the drawing from the original course book, like the first course book. And here you can see the same thing that we talked about right now is you can see the hair, which are like, I am going to take a layer, which are like really flowing, okay? And light. These are really flowing and light, suggesting the hair, the bouncy, the curliness. See that the fur in her clothes, okay? You really want to feel the fur in there, okay? Against the hardness of the knuckles, okay? The bones, the knuckles are hard, but the fur is really soft. So see, the lines are even lighter than the hair itself, okay? So that feels like even lighter material, which is fur, basically. Look at the hat, okay? It's like a leather hat. So, and the line is more organic. Line is more like wavy, you know, kind of like this. It suggests more the wrinkling in the leather and the hardness of the leather, okay? Look at the folds and look at the contrast within the pants, you know, like the jeans she's wearing. So yeah, full of line texture, this drawing, like really one, amazing one. And let's look at this one here, okay? And so this is the one, basically the nude one. So look at the thumb, right? Really the bony thumbs and that elbow is really coming out. So this is more related to the depth perception that we talked about, okay?
Yeah,
And it's
exactly. I was just going to say that the reason the darks are picked here is for what Mritunjay taught you guys. I wanted that forearm is within the silhouette of the torso, but I still wanted it to be important. So I went really heavy on its outline to make sure it came forward.
I think it's like it has like both the concepts. I mean, look at the bone here, you like hardened up and it's
Mm-hmm.
also like coming out. So I think it has like both the line texture and the perception, the depth contrast.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, I just like love this hand.
Thank
Never
you.
had to say this, but all right. The last one, are you gonna talk about this or should I?
Yeah, sure. No, it's fine. This is the one that was on the thumbnail for the videos you guys saw at the very beginning. So to close up here today, I like this drawing. You know, it's funny. It's not a hyper forceful dynamic drawing, but what I love about this drawing is two areas. I love the hair, and I love his scalp popping up out of the circle of the hair. So it really feels like the softness of his hair is surrounding the skull and is going all the way around the head. And you've got like this soft, fuzzy hat with a hole at the top, right? That his head is sitting in. And I'm really happy with the way that turned out. I think that's an excellent example, like Matunje's drawing there. It's an excellent example of line equaling texture, you know? Obviously, this drawing has a lot of like force sculpting in it, which is why it's used in the book in the area it's used in. And then Matunje, if you can just go down a little bit, you guys will also see like in the stomach, I kept trying to figure out really the trajectory of the force, but it kind of works for gravity as well because of all the weight in his stomach, his lower stomach areas where everything is sitting and hanging, right? So you're getting, you know, you're getting two things out of it. So yeah. So I think it's pretty much it. That takes us full circle. This was the thumbnail of today. Yeah, I think today was really great. I hope that you guys, you know, out there got something out of the idea of line as language. And now we've given you more ways to talk, right? To write or draw your ideas, right? We talked about applied force. We talked about gravity. We talked about the line darkening comes through process to finalization. We talked about depth today. And we also talked about texture. The texture thing, by the way, in the body, you only have really three things you're dealing with: hair, muscle, and bone, right? So texturally. Of course, then you can add gravity to that and applied force. Now you got 5. Then you got the process thing that Swenley talked about. So now you're up to 6, right? If you take that to clothes, boom, right? Like whole new world of line, which is that drawing of mine that Matunje showed today. Now there's, I don't know how many different varieties of texture, right? You're talking about leather against denim against, you know, feathers versus satin and silk, right? There's just so much different stuff going on there. So, and that we'll be working on that in the future to come. So anyway, thank you everyone. Thank you, Swenley, Matunje. Awesome job today as always, guys. And thank you for the rest of you to coming and stopping by our Force channel this Friday. Again, if you ever have any ideas or suggestions, this one came out of last week, by the way. Somebody happened to mention this concept and I thought, oh, that'd be a really cool thing to talk about and dig into line weight. Always feel free to throw your ideas in the chat while we're here. We do take them seriously. You know, I'd love to try and support you guys as much as possible. And that's it. Have a great weekend. And we will all see you next Friday. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yes, bye-bye.
Take care.
See ya.